Hey guys, Sue's here with another keto dinner recipes video. I hope these keto meals, easy dinner ideas will help you plan what to eat on your keto diet this week. Let's get into it. First up, we made these awesome sesame ginger country style ribs, a little bit of cabbage on the side. So to start with, in a medium-sized bowl, I added a half a cup of liquid aminos. You could use soy if you prefer. A third of a cup apple cider vinegar. To that, I'm adding 3 tablespoons of sesame oil, along with 1.5 tablespoons of just regular white sesame seeds, a teaspoon of ground ginger, 2 tablespoons of brown swerve, a heaping teaspoon of minced garlic, and then I'm adding about 1/4 of a cup of chopped green onions. I used the white part, light green, and a little bit of the dark green parts, but mostly the lighter parts. Whisking that together until everything is dissolved and well combined. And I'm going to stick this to the side and grab our ribs. So for this recipe, I'm using 2 pounds of these country style boneless ribs. It's basically just Boston butt chopped up. Always look for these on sale and try to stock up when I can. Pouring our marinade over the top of those. I'm just going to kind of roll the ribs around in that to make sure they're all fully coated. Pop a lid on this. And you know, as far as marinades go, the longer you marinate it, the better. I'm only going to marinate mine for a few hours, but you could definitely do this the night before or the morning of when you are planning to cook this. So just popping that in the fridge. Now when I get ready to cook my ribs, I have a baking sheet lined with nonstick foil, and I'm just taking those out and lining them up. Now pouring the excess marinade into a small pot on the stove. We're going to bring that to a boil in a second to use it later. Popping these into a 375-degree oven for 20 minutes for our first go round. Now I'm bringing that marinade up to a boil and letting it cook for about 5 minutes. And if you're liking what you guys see so far, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss one of our weekly keto dinner recipes videos. And taking our ribs out of the oven for their first go round, I'm just flipping each of them over with a fork. And then I'm just gonna pour this marinade over those, nothing fancy here. And I'm gonna pop these back into the oven for another 25 minutes, saving about 1/4 of a cup of that marinade. We're going to use that in our cabbage. Now to a large pot, I'm adding a couple tablespoons of sesame oil and probably about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of chopped onion. And over medium-high heat, I am just stirring this all around until our onion starts getting a little fragrant. And just going to cook that for a couple minutes before adding 4 cups of chopped Napa cabbage. Now this is not the type of cabbage I would normally use for this recipe, but if you've watched some of my previous videos the last week, I have used Napa cabbage in my recipes and I had a tiny bit left over I needed to use up. So I'm tossing that all around, almost like frying it. And then I'm pouring that little last bit of marinade on top, stirring from the bottom. Adding some ground sea salt and ground black pepper, adding a splash of rice vinegar to this recipe. Make sure you check that your rice vinegar is carb free. This isn't necessary, I just like that little pop of kind of tartness that rice vinegar gives it. And I'm just going to keep stirring this around until it's all wilted and soft, popping a lid on to help with that process. Here are our ribs out of the oven, and here they are all plated up. Now this is obviously just the biggest one here on the plate. We just made enough cabbage for the 2 of us, and the ribs definitely store in the refrigerator and reheat well. These are absolutely delicious. I'll be making them again. Next up, we made this Belizean stewed chicken from my Breathe I'm Hungry. I've been wanting to try this recipe for a while. So to start with, you're adding 2 tablespoons of achiote paste. Now what that is basically just ground up annatto. It should be easier to find than it is, but any kind of ground up annatto, just add that to a large bowl. To that I'm adding 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, a teaspoon of ground cumin, a teaspoon of dried oregano, 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1 tablespoon of granulated swerve, and then I'm just whisking that together until it's all nice and dissolved. Now for her recipe, she uses 4 whole chicken legs and separates them into 8 pieces. I don't have time for that nonsense. I am not trying to cut these chicken legs apart. So I just have mine all together. My husband is the only one that will really be eating this, as I don't really like eating chicken thighs or chicken legs. So I'm popping all 4 of the chicken leg quarters into the bowl and just tossing them until they are fully coated. I'm just gonna let this marinate for about an hour. Now look at my hands. I don't know if you can tell, but they are a little stained just from mixing that in for about a minute. So I would recommend using gloves if you don't want your hands stained when you're cooking anything with annatto. You know, they use it as a natural dye in all kinds of foods, and I didn't even even think about putting gloves on. So now after that is marinated, I'm taking my Instant Pot. I have it set on saute, adding a tablespoon of coconut oil, and once it's melted and hot, I'm just going to add one of my chicken leg quarters and brown it for about 1.5 to 2 minutes on each side, flipping it over to do the other side. And then I'm just going to remove it to a separate dish and repeat that process for the other 3 chicken leg quarters. Now when I get done, you see it's very dark in my Instant Pot. I am adding to that a cup of sliced up onion and almost 2 teaspoons of minced garlic, and then I'm making sure to mix that around the whole time so our garlic doesn't burn. A little different from her recipe, I'm going ahead and adding a splash of chicken broth to this and just scraping up the bits off the bottom of my pan to deglaze it and make sure nothing is on there that's going to interfere with it coming up to pressure later. Now putting all of my chicken leg quarters back into the pot, just right on top of those onions. And to our bowl that has the rest of the marinade in it, I'm adding 2 cups of chicken broth. Now you may have noticed for this recipe, we haven't added any salt because the achiote paste is kind of salty in itself. And then for our chicken broth, I am using just regular chicken broth instead of low sodium. Whisking that together until it's all dissolved, pouring all of that on top of our chicken, popping the lid on, and cooking this on high pressure for 20 minutes. And I did just let mine naturally release just because I always get started on something else and I'm never there to release it quicker, but if you want to, you can. And to serve it up, I steamed some cauliflower rice in the microwave with a little bit of butter, salt, and ground black pepper, and just served a chicken leg quarter on top. My husband said that this was delicious. He said it's not anything that he would request me to make like over and over again. It wasn't a favorite, but as far as stewed chicken goes, it was nice and tasty. Next up, this is just a quick use what you have in your freezer kind of meal right here. Really nothing fancy. I will link the recipe below that inspired this, but she made hers with like a smoked sausage, which I think would be so much better. But to a large skillet over medium-high heat, I added a couple tablespoons of olive oil, added about 1/4 of a cup of onion chopped up, and then I cooked those together a couple minutes before adding a pound of just ground sausage, almost like breakfast sausage that you would make sausage gravy with, and that's kind of what we're going for here. Using my handy dandy meat chopper upper, I always have linked in the description box, to break this apart and brown it, cook it all the way. I am adding 2 cups of petite long stem green beans that I thawed out, and this was the bottom of the bag, so these are actually kind of broken apart and smaller. I am just stirring from the bottom to mix these all in to let those get tender, but I still like them to have a little bit of firmness to them, if that makes any sense. Adding a little bit of salt and a nice amount of ground black pepper, and then as her recipe says, we're adding 2 tablespoons of sour cream and just mixing that in. And as I started doing this, I just didn't feel like it was creamy enough for me, and it, really was reminding me of like a sausage gravy, like a sausage breakfast gravy. So I decided to add 2 ounces of cream cheese to it, and I just kind of cut it into 4 pieces to help it melt quicker, and stirred that in until that was completely melted, and just kept stirring it around until it was all combined and more the consistency of sausage gravy. You could also add cream to this. This was super quick and easy to make. It tasted fine. It's not anything to write home about, but it will get the job done. When I had it left over, I actually topped it with a little shredded cheddar cheese and found that was even better, but try it if you dare. If you really are a fan of ground sausage, then you'll like it. Next up, everybody that watches this channel, you know that I am a fan of steak, so we just cooked a ribeye here. I cooked it a little differently than I normally would, and of course roasted some asparagus. So for asparagus, I just took a handful. Of course, I'm just wiggling it and breaking those stalks off of it to leave the tender parts of it, and taking a couple tablespoons of avocado oil. You could definitely use extra virgin olive oil. Gathering my asparagus, making sure it's all fully coated, spreading it back out on the pan, topping it with a generous amount of Himalayan pink sea salt, and I'm going to pop this into a 400-degree oven for 25 minutes. While that's cooking, I preheated my cast iron skillet over medium-high heat, so you can see it's smoking hot, before adding a couple tablespoons of butter to it. I have my 2 thin ribeyes here, and I have just been marinating them in a couple tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce and minced garlic. I did put some salt and pepper on them and then placed them in the cast iron seasoned side down. Went ahead and put some salt and pepper on the other side as well, and I'm going to cook these approximately 4 to 5 minutes on each side. and turning that over, and just from our cast iron being nice and preheated, you can see it's got a nice char on it. And then I am taking a tablespoon of Kerrygold butter and putting it on the top of each one. Now, the way I'm cooking these over high heats, they're getting dark on the outside, almost like a Pittsburgh style steak, but the inside is nice and medium rare. Here's our asparagus out of the oven, and here it is plated up. Simple, easy, hand-seared steak, not the way I normally do them, but so delicious. So there's what we cooked at our house this week on our keto diet. I hope you liked these keto dinner recipes. If you watched this far, go ahead and check out, I have linked right here a few of our favorite keto lemon desserts, and check out our other videos on our What's for Dinner playlist that is also linked on this end card as well. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and until next time, bye guys.